Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. In an important decision intended to put an end to the inordinate delay in the prosecution of politicians in criminal cases, the centre has decided to set up special courts to deal exclusively with cases against MPs and MLAs and to dispose them off within a year. The centre's decision could be a body blow to politicians who, despite facing serious charges, have stayed in Parliament and state assemblies because of delays in trying them. All of them should come under the purview of the special courts and their fate could be decided within a year. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyse the government's decision to set up special courts to try tainted lawmakers. Joining me on the programme today are Justice R.S. Sodhi, former judge of the Delhi High Court, Brijesh, Kalappa, spokesperson of the Congress and Supreme Court advocate, and we are also joined by Deepak, advocate of the Supreme Court. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Justice Sodhi, I'd like to begin with you, of course. What do you make of the government's decision to set up special courts to deal with tainted lawmakers?
You know, I am very happy that such a decision has been taken. And what I'm most happy is that the government acknowledges now that 167 cases require one judge. So this is another addition which the government has now realized, and I'm so happy that now the strength of judges is bound to increase, if not only for the politicians, even others are entitled to speedy justice.
Okay. Deepak, let me bring you into the picture now. Do you believe that special courts for politicians are justified?
I believe special courts in themselves, I think the concept is not bad, at least on paper. But I'm not sure if special courts have really worked and have proved their efficacy over the years. Special courts, perhaps, at least when it comes to issues like these, may address a lot of optical issues in terms of the government being seen as doing something tangible about it, and therefore it must be welcomed. But I think the devil always lies in the implementation and how to go about it. We can keep creating special fora as much as we want, but in general, I think we need to focus on speedy justice delivery across the board. So I just wanted to give the example of the Commercial Courts Act of 2015, and this was meant to expedite the prosecution of commercial matters of commercial interest, so that some kind of a message goes out to the investor community that we are an equally commercially sensitive jurisdiction and we can handle sophisticated matters in a timely fashion. I'm not sure that the Commercial Courts Act has delivered the goods so far, but perhaps it's too early to make that statement. I just hope that apart from, let's say, passing new legislations and providing infrastructure, we also have the manpower to man these tribunals or to have enough number of hands on the deck. And ultimately, we hope that these are pushed to their logical ends by seeing the actual goods being delivered. And therefore, I think it's a question of understanding as to what exactly is the nature of the special court, how is it going to be different in terms of timelines, and what kind of processes will it adopt, and how many such courts are we going to have. I think the current proposal says about 12. But where, why, how, these are questions that need to be looked into.
And a time frame of 1 year.
Exactly. So I don't think 1,581 cases in a period of 1 year, and that's the backlog that the court is looking at in the petition. I'm not sure that can be disposed of in a period of 1 year. Let's see, I'm not really sure. I think it's a welcome move, of course. There's no doubting it. There's no reason to be the party pooper in this particular case. But I think we need to wait and watch and see how exactly does it translate to an implementation.
You know, Brijesh, Kalappa, you know, the kind of cases that are pending and the nature of charges that have been leveled against some of these tainted lawmakers, do you believe, when you look at that this is imperative that we come out with these special courts?
Well, the provision to have a special court was actually initiated by Mr. Modi during his election speeches, and he promptly forgot about them. And after having forgotten about it, then one of his own party members moved to the Supreme Court. And today we are seeing that thanks to the fact that the courts are coming down on the government, some kind of an attempt is being made to salvage their reputation. And still, it appears that there will not be special courts. And we must remember that it's the BJP which has the largest chunk of criminal legislators and parliamentarians, as well as ministers in government who are also, tainted by one criminal record or another. So therefore, to what extent the kind of intent will be shown? Because Modi ji, when, during 2014, he said that I'm going to unsparingly act against everybody, right? And it's 43 months, 44 months of his regime. And we are still listening to assurances from the government that yes, we are going to have special courts, and when? After a year, right? So the mandate was for 5 years, and everything was conveniently forgotten for 44 months. And now it takes 1 more year, right, for all this to happen. So it's ultimately a lack of intent, considering that, like I said, the large number of legislators and parliamentarians from the Bharatiya Janata Party who are tainted by one criminal, matter or the other.
Okay. Let me bring in Aishwarya, Bhati member, BJP Legal Cell and Supreme Court advocate in the picture. First and foremost, welcome and thank you for joining us on the program. The government lacks intent is what Brijesh Kalappa is suggesting, and the government is not going to be serious about it and not going, probably won't even go through with it, is what he's suggesting.
Well, Brijesh ji would be holding a political brief here. I'm here only as a lawyer, and I actually think that it's a welcome step. However, I agree that the devil would lie in the detail. With my colleague here, because special courts, there are a lot of issues that we as a nation are facing. No doubt tainted lawmakers is one of the most important issues, because these are our lawmakers. They are supposed to frame legislations, lay down policies, be the leaders as to how the nation is to progress, prosper, move into the next century. How the nation prospers and develops, everything depends on that. But there are equally important, significant issues like women's safety issues, etc., for which there has been a lot of clamor for fast-track courts issues. The commercial courts require that the atmosphere has to be right for the matters to be. Ultimately, justice delivery system has to fall in place. That the special courts cannot really take the place of the regular dispensation. And this is not a new litigation. This is an issue that has been taken up by the Supreme Court for several years now. At least the three Chief Justices before this, in the times of Justice Thakur, there was a similar petition that was coming up. And the reason why he said thus, how many special courts can we have? And then the problem is, if you have too many special courts, the regular courts suffer. So the devil will definitely lie in the detail. We have to make systems work. This is a welcome step. But it should not be at the expense of anything else, because if justice delivery goes even abysmally low from where we are today, then the threat is that people will try to settle. People will have no option but to settle their disputes on roadside. That we don't want. We want a robust justice delivery system which is able to give justice. And it's not just for accused persons. A lot of people are, in the political area, a lot of people, innocents, are wrongly targeted, wrongly framed also. So a quick system, a system that is time-bound, will ensure that either which ways, whether the petition is right or wrong, either which ways it is settled out in a time-bound manner. Sure.
Justice Sodhi, pendency of cases is a major problem, and especially when there are so many cases pending in several courts in India. You're going to have special courts now, 12 of them, to deal specifically with politicians. Do you believe that's the right thing to do?
For the time being, yes, it is absolutely the right thing to do. You see, at the moment, let us understand that our justice delivery system breeds corruption because it is delayed. The very fact that a lawbreaker can have a ball of a time and a law abider can really suffer is a concept which should have been reversed long ago. It doesn't matter whether it's this government or the previous one. It doesn't really matter. The question is, the delivery system has been deteriorating from time to time, and there is no stemming this deterioration unless we wake up. Finally, like I said, I am so happy that the government has now realized that at least 167 cases require one judge. We are talking about lakhs of cases lying unattended. We've got vacancies right from the top to the bottom. We've got shortages. The infrastructure is not there, and this is to my mind a very healthy beginning. If the politician can be politician can be dealt with quickly, I'm sure it will percolate down, and the system itself will be reformed.
When you have 1 year, a time frame for these 12 special courts, why can't the same principle be applied to the other courts as well? Justice, the question is for you.
This is exactly what I'm saying. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm saying. You see, now that you realize, firstly, you realize that there are shortage of judges. Okay, now that there are shortage of judges and you've realized this, I'm happy you're experimenting it on the politician first. Well, it's a good beginning. But remember, this cannot be a knee-jerk reaction. It has to be a permanent solution which must continue. And the judicial system has to strengthen itself, otherwise it gives premium to dishonesty as it is of today.
Okay. You know, Deepak, let's look at the special courts on the whole and look at their track record. What has been the track record of special courts in this country?
If I could just paraphrase an oft-used phrase in the context of a different situation altogether, that the response to 1,000 different cuts cannot be 1,000 different bandages. And I think when you set up special courts, you end up more or less admitting that your regular courts are not exactly up to the task and there is something seriously wrong about it. Now let's break this down to specifics. When you say that the infrastructure needs to be improved and you need more judges, the fundamental question perhaps that you should ask is, what is it about the system that doesn't seem to be incentivizing more law graduates to take up the profession as a judge, both in the lower judiciary as well as the higher judiciary? What can you do to change that particular situation? Because I think unless and until we are able to encourage influx of fresh blood into the judiciary and we are able to tell people that this is a potential option that they must consider, I don't see what's the, I mean, how do you go about reforming the situation? You can have more courts, you can have specialized courts, but to what end? Who's going to sit on those benches? Now, sometimes I think one example that's often quoted is that an average judge, let's say perhaps in Singapore, makes at least 10 to 15 times more in terms of usual pay compared to a judge in India. And in fact, I had some of district court judges teaching me as a law student who actually wanted to write books on the poverty and the penury of a district judge or low court judges. This is something that most people don't even realize. So while the position itself may command a certain amount of authority and respect, at the end of the day, there are certain realities of life that must be met regardless of which position you hold. And how do we make sure that this remains a decent option for bright law students or law graduates to consider? That's one question. Two, see, when you start creating special courts, I think you also interfere to some extent with the flow of law in terms of the evolution of that particular jurisprudence. What kind of a message are you sending with respect to certain subject matter? Why is it that certain subject matter deserves a special kind of treatment? In fact, when the Commercial Courts Act came about, one of the questions that I think legitimately was asked of it by other litigants was, what is it about the Commercial Courts Act or commercial matters that warrants a special treatment? Why don't we get the same kind of remedies and mechanisms that are available in Commercial Courts Act as far as the non-commercial matters are concerned? So I think we have had enough law commissions, we have had enough reports. I think it's a question of culling out the specific recommendations from each of these law reports and addressing the issue as a whole, not just at the central level but also at the state level, because at the end of the day, I think one of the responses that went from the center as far as this particular issue was, this is also a state subject. Law and order is equally a state subject.
Yes, it is.
So why don't we actually have some kind of a consensual mechanism where we do this? Now, obviously an issue such as this, when you speak of elected representatives and politicians, is bound to get a political twist. But then perhaps we must be at least be in a position to address some of these issues, dehorse the political angle, and hopefully see what is it that we can do to increase the confidence of the Aam Aadmi when it comes to the justice delivery system, as well as holding our elected representatives to account when it comes to them having a decent track record, because I don't think any politician today can have the perfect track record. So I think a balance needs to be struck. At the same time, I don't think we start creating a parallel universe when it comes to these kind of matters. A special court at this stage is perhaps necessary, but then should it be a long-term solution, or can we find a solution at some point of time in the usual or in the regular, let's say, course of justice dispensation itself? What happens to the existing CBI special courts? What happens
as an experimental basis, it's a good thing, is what you're saying.
Right. As an experimental basis, I think we can give it a shot. But I don't think this should become the solution, because then for every specialized matter, we'll ask for a special tribunal, which I don't think makes sense at all.
Okay. Now, talking about these special courts, Brijesh, Kalappa, 12 of them, 1,600 pending cases. What should be the composition of these courts, do you think?
Well, I think first of all, the quality of justice really depends on the kind of people manning these courts. So, of course, one can't really, make a choice there because you'll have to pick out from what's available. But I think the primary issue is this, that where we have not been able to fill in nearly 50% of the vacancies at the high courts, right? So, where are we going to get the kind of judge? Because ultimately, if there is any application, it will all come and there will be a clog at the high court level. So, if you don't have the vacancies cleared at the high court, and like my friend pointed out, if you don't make the prospect of being elevated to the high court a reasonably attractive one, I don't think you're going to attract talent. So the first thing is the quality of judges, to clear the backlogs. And across the board, the backlogs have to be cleared. Now, after so many years, the judges are getting their due share in terms of what their salaries ought to be. Earlier, even the registrar of the court used to earn far more than the Chief Justice of India. So just a few months ago, and I am told that the recommendations are still to be initiated. Therefore, still, even as on today, as we speak, the Chief Justice of India earns less than the registrar of the court, or even less than his private secretary. So these are issues which had to be sorted out long ago, but they're still not done. Now, ultimately, how do you keep the wheels of justice grinding, and they have to be done surely and very safely? So these are all issues which are imponderables, and we have not been able to find solutions to them. Of course, the point is that today punishing a politician, right, is seen as something which is of great importance. But ultimately, one must ask ourselves the question that to infuse a little bit of politics into all of this, that the Honorable Prime Minister spoke so much about the corruption of the UPA. It's been 44 months out of his 60 months in office. Whom has he acted against? Has he initiated a fresh charge against a single person? Has he taken a single new person into jail? Has he brought fresh charges? Has he filed recovery suits saying that, huge amounts of money had been stolen away? Has he filed a single recovery suit? So it's all very good to speak from a public pulpit and say, look, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But ultimately, I think, the facts simply just don't add up. And there is a huge gap from where we are heading to where we were promised that things would be and the direction which we would take.
Okay. Basically, the promises have not been kept is what you're suggesting at this point in time. And you also said that the flavor of the season is that the politicians should pay for their sins. But moving forward now, budget of approximately 8 crore rupees for these special courts. Aishwarya, Bhati, do you believe that, all of this is doable with a budget of 8 crore rupees?
Well, I'm sure whoever has worked out the budget must have done it properly. But I do want to bring in another aspect of it. I feel that as a lawyer who's been practicing for 20 years plus now, I feel that the biggest stumbling point in our justice delivery system still is shoddy investigation. That is the biggest stumbling point that we have seen. And whatever happens in investigation actually seals the fate of the case, no matter where it goes, how far it goes. And despite efforts of the Supreme Court and efforts of, I don't know how much effort governments have put in on all these years, but this is an area which has still not, like all of us, we use a lot more technology in our personal lives. But the kind of technology that our investigation teams use, it's the same beat constable who has the same responsibility to go, lodge an FIR, find out who's there, and then go and investigate. We are using very little science and technology in our investigative methods. And unless we integrate that into these special courts, things are not going to move very much. I think, the things that Deepak ji has extensively spoken about, these are the, the long-term solutions, the long-term goals. They are absolutely required, but that does not take away from the fact that you need some things to be done in a reactive manner. We do seem to be getting more and more into the reactive mode because in the last 70 years, we have really not progressed how we should have progressed as a republic, as a democracy. So we have a lot to go. There is a huge backlog that we are carrying. So we have to now start looking at the long-term solutions, as well as there are issues which will require a reactionary approach for a limited time. So that is how it needs to be looked at. Special courts are welcome. It can't be the long-term solution. It's great to start with, but ultimately the justice delivery system has to be robust to carry the burden of every litigation that goes. And you know, one more issue, the mediation and conciliation is so effectively used in all, across the developed countries. And in fact, most 60-70% cases don't even go into litigation. Pre-litigation mediation is a very robust concept. These are also some of the issues which we need to work on, and these are the long-term solutions, because ultimately how far can we go with reactionary responses?
Sure. Let me go across to all my guests now to get final closing comments on the program. Now, starting with Justice Sodhi. Justice Sodhi, as far as this move is concerned, do you believe that it is going to succeed, or do you believe that political might is going to win finally?
No, there is no question of political might against a court. The court must always deliver the justice, and if it is equipped properly and given due considerations, I don't see why a special court cannot be successful. After all, we have had special courts for CBI matters. We have had special courts even for TADAs. We've had special courts dealing with various other offences, and they have been very successful. There are delays in the normal delivery system of our country. We have to get rid of that delay. It is this delay which has to be treated. And special courts, well, good. All right, there are specialized subjects which are being dealt with by a special court. They can be dealt with, and there's nothing wrong. And well, if the politicians can have with quickly, I'm sure everybody else can also be, but given time and given the resources.
Deepak, is there a political will really to try and push this measure through, or do you believe that it's going to be a question of whether politicians should be punished at the end of the day or not?
I have to agree with what Mr. Brijesh Kalappa said, that Mr. Modi must make an example out of the culprits in the 2G scam, in the CWG scam, and in every other scam that took place during the UPA regime. There's no doubting it at all. I think he should. Because if he doesn't, then people might not take the next commitment that comes from him seriously. And I hope before 2019 he makes an example out of every person responsible for all those scams. That's point number one. Point number two, I think there are 4 crore cases that are pending across the country. That's the last estimated conservative figure. I don't know what that number is mushroomed to today. But if you're looking at 4 crore cases, I think at least 2 to 3 lakh cases are pending, or maybe lesser than that are pending before the Supreme Court, which is a huge number for the size of the Supreme Court. And I think the Supreme Court is trying to do its best to dispose of matters, and we get to see that on a daily basis. But then you have to understand that when we try and push expeditious disposal for the sake of expeditious disposal, sometimes merits and justice are the first casualties. So we have to strike a decent balance between expeditious disposal and also meaningful disposal of matters, unless they result in extensive appeals and all these courts getting clogged.
Okay.
And increasingly, most of these matters end up coming on fact-related issues before the Supreme Court, which would be only adjudicating constitutional issues by and large. So perhaps if we start respecting the fact that the trial court must be the most rigorous forum possible, give it the assistance it needs from, let's say, law enforcement agencies, and therefore police reforms and judicial reforms have to necessarily go hand in hand, I think we'll see some kind of a long-term solution. But I hope this is the beginning of something much more concrete, comprehensive, and long-lasting.
I hope so too. Brijesh Kalappa, your closing comments on the program.
See, the first thing I'd like to say is that as far as this 1 year the issue is concerned, that these courts are going to come into play in 1 year, I have my very serious reservations about it. I feel that a person who has not initiated anything for the last 44 months will not be able to do anything for the next 1 year. And as we know, there are a huge number of bureaucratic delays. So the first thing is that if you made a promise, and I think it's essential that every single citizen holds a politician who's made the promise to the promises he has made. And if that was the case, then not a single promise which this current regime has made has actually fructified. So keeping this as a benchmark, I think one can safely assume that the next 1 year will pass by and nothing will actually happen. And more promises will be made before in the run-up to 2019. As you must remember, we are already today in December of 2017.
I think that will be decided in the court of the people in 2019. We'll wait for that. In the meantime, Aishwarya, Bhati, please close the show for us.
Well, Frank, the issue that we are discussing today, I think it's a very welcome step. It is the beginning of a good, because in democracy, the people's representatives have to be accountable. And, you know, making sure that the criminal charges that they are facing are fast-tracked to ensure that truth comes out in the court of the public quickly is definitely a very positive step. It will strengthen our democracy, but it should not be the end-all and be-all. More needs to be done, and you know, this may just be a good short stopgap arrangement, but we need to comprehensively work on long-term solutions.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.